You were not called to be ordinary. From the moment your soul first inhaled the breath of existence, something ancient within you stirred, an echo of eternity reverberating in your chest. It was not the voice of comfort or conformity, but a whisper, drenched in sacred longing. Become what you truly are. Beneath the surface of your ordinary life, beneath the masks you wear for others, there is a hidden pulse, a primordial call, vibrating like the strings of a harp strummed by an unseen hand. The psalmist once wrote, deep calls unto deep. That is the sound you hear in your restless moments, the silence that roars in the midnight hours when the world has gone still, but your heart refuses to sleep. It is the cry of yourself, the totality of your being, yearning to break through the husks of who you think you should be, tearing through the layers of societal roles, expectations, and fears. You were not made to simply function. You were created to awaken. The path to that awakening, however, is not the broad road of ease and approval. It is the narrow, winding, solitary descent into the depths of your own psyche. It is the confrontation with the shadow, that part of you you've spent your life avoiding, repressing, denying. The darkness within that you were taught to fear is, paradoxically, the gate to your most luminous self. Carl Jung taught us that the shadow is not the enemy. It is the doorway. In its grotesque and terrifying forms, it holds captive your disowned power, your unlived life, your capacity for authenticity. The very parts of you that you exile become the architects of your unconscious suffering. So long as you refuse to meet them, they rule you from the depths, shaping your fate without your knowledge. But when you turn and face the darkness, when you summon the courage to meet your shadow eye to eye, something shifts. You stop being a mere fragment of yourself and begin the alchemical process of integration. Like Jacob wrestling with the angel through the night, refusing to let go until he is blessed, you too must wrestle with your inner contradictions. And when dawn breaks, you emerge with a limp, yes, but also with a new name. The journey within is not linear, nor is it swift. It spirals, like the ancient labyrinths carved into stone by hands that understood the soul's path long before psychology gave it language. Every descent into darkness brings the possibility of ascent into light. Every surrender to death becomes the soil from which new life may grow. The unconscious is not merely a repository of repressed memories or instinctual drives. It is the womb of creation, the matrix of your becoming. In its formless depths dwell the archetypes, the primordial images etched into the very fabric of your being. The hero, the mother, the trickster, the sage. These are not mere symbols of culture, but living realities that animate your psyche from within, influencing your desires, your fears, your dreams. When you dream of flying, of falling, of being chased or lost, it is the unconscious speaking in its symbolic tongue, inviting you into conversation. Most ignore these invitations, dismissing them as meaningless or irrational. But you were not called to be ordinary. You were called to listen, to decipher the messages encrypted in mythic imagery, to walk the ancient path of individuation, the journey toward becoming a whole and integrated self. This is no easy pilgrimage. The ego, the part of you that clings to certainty and control, will resist at every turn. It will mock the journey as foolish, dangerous, unnecessary. But the Proverbs remind us, there is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end it leads to death. The life that seems right because it is safe and predictable often leads to a slow death of the soul, a life where you never truly live, only exist. To individuate is to risk everything, your false security, your image in the eyes of others, your comfortable ignorance. But what is gained in exchange is beyond measure. Authenticity, inner freedom, a life animated by purpose rather than fear. And yet, even as you transcend the ego's narrow confines, you do not discard it. Like the vessel that contains sacred oil, the ego is necessary, but it must be transparent to the self, no longer opaque and obstructive. In yielding its tyranny, it becomes a servant rather than a master, allowing the deeper wisdom of the self to guide your life. You begin to see that the journey is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you have always been. Beneath the layers of conditioning and defense mechanisms, the child who once marveled at the stars, who danced without shame, who cried without apology, that child is still within you, waiting not to be fixed, but to be welcomed home. As the ancient prayer says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." Renewal is not an external achievement, but an inward return, a reconnection with the divine image etched into your very soul. And what of suffering? It is inevitable. Transformation demands it. Just as gold is refined by fire, so too is your character forged through the crucible of pain. There is no individuation without the experience of being broken open, without nights of confusion where all certainties dissolve, leaving only raw vulnerability. Yet it is precisely here, in this nakedness, that grace descends. My strength is made perfect in weakness, declares the voice of God, not in your polished persona, not in your performance, but in your surrender. In the cracks of your carefully constructed identity, the light of the transcendent self pours through, illuminating illuminating the path you could never have found on your own. This is the paradox of the journey. To find wholeness, you must first accept your brokenness. To become extraordinary, you must embrace your most ordinary, flawed human self. You must look unflinchingly at your fear, your envy, your rage, not to be consumed by them, but to transmute them into wisdom, compassion, and strength. The self is not an ideal to be achieved, but a mystery to be encountered. It is both within you and beyond you, both personal and transpersonal. It is the still small voice that Elijah heard not in the wind nor in the earthquake, but in the gentle whisper. It is the Christ within, the Imago Dei, the seed of God planted in the soil of your humanity. And now, as you stand at the threshold, the question is no longer whether you are called. It is whether you will answer. For to live an ordinary life, to follow the well-worn paths of least resistance, is easy. But to awaken, to take up the cross of your own becoming, to venture beyond the known into the wild sacred territory of your soul, that is the way of the few, the narrow path, the road less traveled, but it is also the only road that leads home. And so, you take the first step, not with certainty, but with a trembling faith, for the journey into yourself is not a map traced by others, but a wilderness, unique to you alone. No compass can guide you here except the quiet, persistent voice of the soul, often drowned out by the clamor of the world, but never silenced. This is the voice that calls you in the silent moments when the distractions fade. It is the hunger you feel but cannot name, the ache beneath your achievements, the yearning that no relationship, no possession, no accolade can ever satisfy. It is the whisper that reminds you, you were not called to be ordinary. To be ordinary is to live at the surface of things, to construct a life around what is seen, applauded, and rewarded. But to be extraordinary is to descend, to go down into the depths of your unconscious, into the shadowlands where your true treasures lie buried beneath fear, shame, and avoidance. The descent is terrifying because it requires the death of your illusions, the dismantling of the false self you have carefully constructed to survive in a world that fears authenticity. But death is the precondition for resurrection. As the seed must fall to the ground and die before it can bear fruit, so too must your old identity crumble so that the self may emerge. This is the great pattern, the sacred archetype embedded in the story of Christ, the archetype of death and rebirth. It is not merely a religious doctrine, but a psychological necessity. Without crucifixion, there is no resurrection. Without the dark night of the soul, there is no dawn of a new consciousness. The Psalms cry out, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Not because there is no evil, but because you are accompanied, because the journey through darkness is the very condition for encountering the sacred. You must pass through the valley. There is no shortcut, no bypass, and so you continue, descending, deeper, guided not by sight but by trust. Trust that beneath the chaos there is a hidden order, an intelligence that surpasses your limited understanding. The unconscious is not a void but a cosmos, a vast inner universe structured by archetypal forces that shape your story from within. You meet the archetypes not as abstract symbols, but as living presences. The hero stirs within you when you face adversity and refuse to be conquered by it. The wise old man or woman appears in moments of clarity and guidance, whether through a dream, a stranger's words, or an unexpected insight. The trickster disrupts your plans, forcing you to adapt and evolve. These figures are not outside you. They are dimensions of your own psyche, fragments of the wholeness that is your birthright. To encounter them is to recover aspects of yourself, long forgotten, long suppressed. It is to realize that you are far more complex, far more mysterious than the one-dimensional roles you perform in daily life. And here, in this unfolding, you begin to see that individuation, the process of becoming who you are, is not a project of self-improvement but of self-revelation. It is not about becoming better, but about you, that the self, the center and circumference of your psyche, is an image of the Godhead, a spark of the infinite dwelling in the finite form of your humanity. And as this awareness dawns, your relationship to suffering transforms. You no longer see pain as meaningless, but as initiatory. The wounds you carry become sacred. The scars etched into your soul become symbols of battles fought and wisdom earned. The philosopher Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." This is no mere poetic sentiment. It is a psychological truth. Your suffering breaks the shell of the ego, creating an opening through which the transcendent can pour in. Without suffering, the ego remains rigid, defensive, isolated. But through suffering, it is softened, humbled, made permeable. This is why you must not flee your pain, nor numb it with distractions and addictions. You must sit with it, breathe through it, and listen to what it has to teach you. For every sorrow carries within it a seed of transformation, if only you are willing to tend it. The book of Proverbs declares, "The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one one who has insight draws them out. Insight does not come from the surface of life, but from plumbing its depths, from diving into the dark waters of your inner world and retrieving the hidden treasures that lie beneath. You begin to realize that the purpose of your life is not something to be found out there in the external world, but something to be uncovered within. Purpose is not assigned by society or dictated by circumstance. It emerges organically as you become more attuned to your authentic self, and the more you align with that self, the less you are enslaved by the opinions of others, the less you are tossed by the winds of external validation. You move from a life of reaction to a life of creation. You cease to be a passive participant in your story and become its conscious author. This is the ultimate freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to be who you truly are. To live in accordance with the unique pattern inscribed in your soul from the beginning of time. But this freedom comes at a cost. It requires solitude, reflection, courage. It demands that you leave behind the herd, that you step off the beaten path and venture into uncharted territory. It asks you to forsake the familiar comforts of ordinariness for the exhilarating, terrifying adventure of becoming. And yet, as you walk this path, you find that you are never truly alone. For the archetypes walk with you, the ancestors who made this journey before you cheer you on, and the self, the divine center within, guides you with a wisdom that surpasses your limited comprehension. The ancient words resound, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." Your calling is not random, your journey is not accidental. You are here for a reason, summoned by a voice older than time itself, invited to participate in the unfolding of creation through the unique expression of your being. You were not called to be ordinary. You were called to be a vessel of the sacred, a living testament to the transformative power of consciousness, a beacon of light in a world that has grown dark with forgetfulness. And as you continue walking this path, you realize that the goal is not to arrive at some final destination, but to walk with presence, to live each moment as an expression of your deepest truth, to allow the journey itself to shape you into the person you were always meant to be. This is the path of individuation. This is the path of the soul. This is the path you were born to walk, and so you walk, not as one seeking perfection, but as one embracing wholeness. For to be whole is not to be without flaw, but to integrate the full spectrum of your humanity, the light and the shadow, the strength and the frailty, the wisdom and the foolishness. You come to understand that your wounds, your fears, your contradictions are not obstacles to your becoming, but essential threads woven into the tapestry of your soul. The words of the apostle echo through time. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." You no longer need to disguise your vulnerability, to armor yourself with pretense and pride. Instead, you can stand naked before yourself, stripped of illusions, and finally see the truth, that you are, and have always been, enough. This is the essence of the spiritual journey, not to ascend to some lofty ideal beyond your humanity, but to descend fully into it, to inhabit it with reverence, to become utterly, unapologetically yourself. The ordinary world may never understand this path. It will tell you to fit in, to play small, to suppress the parts of you that do not conform. But the soul does not care for the approval of the crowd. The soul is wild, elemental, untamed. It longs for freedom, for authenticity, for communion, with the deep currents of life that flow beneath the surface of things. And so you keep walking, even when the path grows steep and treacherous, even when the nights stretch long and starless, for you have tasted the alternative, the safe, predictable existence of the ordinary, and found it hollow. You know that there is no going back. The spiritual teachers of old understood this. The desert fathers, the mystics, the shamans, they all left behind the comforts of the known to seek something greater, something truer. They ventured into the wilderness, not to escape life, but to find it, to shed the false self and encounter the raw, unmediated presence of the divine. You, too, are called into the wilderness. Not a wilderness of sand and stone, but of psyche and spirit. A liminal space where the structures of your former life dissolve, and something new, something ancient and yet unborn, begins to take shape. Here, in this sacred wilderness, you encounter the self not as an idea, but as a living reality. It is vast, mysterious, ineffable. It transcends the boundaries of your ego, yet it is also the very core of your being. It is the God image within you, the imago Dei, the spark of the eternal that animates your mortal form. The realization dawns slowly, like the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. You are not separate from the divine. You are an expression of it, a unique articulation of the infinite made manifest in time and space. Your existence is not an accident, but a necessity. Without you, the universe would be incomplete. And yet, this realization does not inflate your ego. It humbles you, for you see that the same spark that burns within you also burns within all beings. You are connected, interwoven in a great web of life, a cosmic dance of interdependence and reciprocity. The words of the psalmist take on new meaning. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, What is mankind that you are mindful of them? You stand in awe of the vastness of existence, and yet you know deep in your bones that you belong to it, that you are a vital part of its unfolding story. This awareness transforms your relationship to life. No longer do you see the world as a battleground to conquer or a marketplace to exploit. You see it as sacred, as alive, as a mirror reflecting your own inner landscape. Every encounter becomes an opportunity for self-discovery. Every challenge a catalyst for growth. You come to recognize that your struggles, your losses, your disappointments, all the moments you wished away, were in fact the crucibles in which your soul was forged. Without them, you would not have been broken open. Without them, you would not have learned to listen, to see, to love. The ancient wisdom becomes clear. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. Death and rebirth are not events reserved for the end of life. They are the very rhythms by which you are perpetually transformed. You begin to live in harmony with these rhythms, surrendering to the cycles of loss and renewal, of contraction and expansion. You cease resisting the inevitable changes of life and instead embrace them as necessary rites of passage on the journey of your becoming. And in this surrender, you find peace. Not the peace of a life free from conflict, but the peace that comes from knowing that everything belongs, that nothing is wasted, that even your most painful experiences are woven into the greater tapestry of your individuation. The philosopher and psychologist Carl Jung called this the process of becoming who you are, not who you wish you were, not who others expect you to be, but who you truly are beneath all the masks and defenses. This process is not a linear ascent, but a spiral, a continual return to the core of your being. Each time, with greater depth, greater clarity, greater compassion, you begin to see that your greatest task is not to achieve, but to remember the truth that was whispered to you before you were born, that you are worthy, that you are loved, that you are here for a purpose. And as this remembering takes root, your life begins to change. You start making choices not from fear or obligation, but from alignment with your deepest values and desires. You cultivate relationships that nourish your soul. You engage in work that reflects your authentic self. You create not to impress, but to express. You become, slowly and surely, a living embodiment of the extraordinary, not because you have become perfect, but because you have become whole. Not because you have transcended your humanity, but because you have embraced it fully, and in doing so, you offer the world the greatest gift you could possibly give, your true self. This is your calling. This is your path. This is the sacred invitation that life extends to you in every moment, in every breath. You are not called to be ordinary. You were called to awaken, to remember, to become. The air here is thinner, sharper. Each breath cuts deeper, as though carving out the last hollow spaces in your chest, making room for something vast, something eternal to take residence. You can feel it, the tension between who you have been and who you are becoming, between the comfort of the familiar and the pull of the unknown. It is here on this threshold that many turn back. They retreat, convincing themselves that the journey was too much, that the calling was a mirage, a fantasy spun by restless longing. They return to their roles, to their routines, to the numbing embrace of ordinariness. But you have come too far to return. The fire has already been kindled within you. You have seen what lies beneath the surface of things, beneath the surface of yourself. You have glimpsed the sacred, the terrifying, the beautiful depths of your own soul. And now, even if you wanted to, you could not unknow what you know. You could not go back to sleep. For once the soul has awakened, it cannot be lulled again into the anesthesia of the ordinary. This is the final paradox, that while the journey calls you outward, beyond the boundaries of your old life, it also calls you inward, deeper into yourself than you have ever dared to go. The mountain and the cave, the sky and the abyss, they are all within you. You realize now that the path has never been about reaching some distant summit, some final, perfected state. The path is the becoming itself, the continual unfolding, the endless integration, the dance between light and shadow, form and formlessness, self and self. And in this realization, something softens in you. The relentless striving gives way to presence. The need to prove, to achieve, to be recognized dissolves like mist in the morning sun. All that remains is the quiet, unwavering commitment to live as who you truly are, moment by moment, breath by breath. The words of the ancient oracle come to you. Know thyself, not as an intellectual exercise, not as a list of traits and preferences, but as a living, embodied truth, a deep, visceral awareness of your essence, your calling, your place within the great web of existence. You see now that your individuality is not in opposition to the collective, but in service to it. By becoming who you truly are, you contribute something irreplaceable to the world, a unique melody in the symphony of life, a distinct brushstroke in the masterpiece of creation. This is your vocation, not to conform, not to impress, but to express, to allow the singular light within you to shine in the only way it can. And as you do, you give others permission to do the same. You become a mirror mirror, reflecting back to those around you the possibility of their own awakening, their own becoming. Your life becomes a living testament to what is possible when one chooses the path of authenticity over conformity, courage over comfort, soul over survival. The ancient words ring out like a bell in the cathedral of your being. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you, not in some distant ethereal realm, but here now in the sacred ordinariness of your everyday life. For the extraordinary is not found in grand gestures or heroic feats, but in the quiet integrity of a life lived in alignment with the soul. It is found in the moments when you choose truth over convenience, love over fear, presence over distraction. It is found in your willingness to sit with your own pain and to hold space for the pain of others. It is found in your courage to follow the thread of your calling, even when the way is unclear and the destination unknown. And so you step forward, not because you are fearless, but because you are faithful. Faithful to the self that has been calling you all along. Faithful to the life that is longing to be lived through you. You realize now that you are not the author of your story in the sense of absolute control, but in the sense of radical participation. You co-create with the mystery, with the archetypal forces that move through you, with the spirit that breathes life into your bones. You walk the path not because it is safe, but because it is true. Not because it guarantees success or security, but because it is the only path that leads to your becoming. And as you walk, the landscape changes. What once appeared as obstacles now reveal themselves as teachers. What once felt like burdens now become blessings. What once seemed like endings now open into new beginnings. You understand now that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived, and that mystery is holy. You bow in reverence to the path, to the self, to the sacred dance of life and death, loss and renewal, descent and ascent. You bow because you understand that you are both the traveler and the path, both the question and the answer, both the wound and the healing. You bow because you know, in the deepest part of your being, that you were not called to be ordinary. You were called to be whole, to be real, to be alive. And so you walk on into the unfolding mystery of your becoming, with open hands, with an open heart, and with a soul ablaze with the fire of your calling. Amen.